Okay, I want to get right into it because I want to ask the question: what happens in an election if a candidate is disqualified? I've been searching through the Utah code, and I think there's a few different things that could happen. But most likely, if a candidate, after the ballots are already um, out and being voted on as they are now, and a candidate becomes disqualified, then that candidate, any votes for that candidate are thrown away votes. If Spencer Cox proves to have been a disqualified candidate because he lacked the signatures to be in the primary, yet was put on the general ballot by the GOP, by the state, by the lieutenant governor, who, by the way, was supposed to be completely out of her race, out of this race. Hers and the governor's is supposed to all be handled by Greg Bell, and no one's heard from Greg Bell on this at all. But say Spencer Cox is disqualified. All of those votes for Spencer Cox go away, and we're left with no Republican on the general election ballot. And it's either the write-in candidate, Phil Lyman, or Richard Lyman, or some other Lyman, or it's the Democrat, Brian King. Now, if I'm the Democrat, I'm saying let this mail-in ballot farce continue for as long as we can before we move to have Spencer Cox disqualified. Hopefully he gets all of the Republican votes, and then he's disqualified, leaving the Democrat with a clear win. The way to combat that, we could argue to have Phil Lyman, myself, put on the ballot. A judge would have to do that, and if the judge is saying, well, we could either reprint the ballots and put Phil Lyman on, or we're going to end up with the Democrat as the governor, every single judge in this state would say, I'd rather have a Democrat than to reprint the ballots and potentially end up with a conservative like Phil Lyman, because they're Democrat judges, even though they have an R by their name. Now that there may be some exceptions to that, but if I'm talking about the Utah Supreme Court, absolutely, they are against my campaign and have been from the start. So that's a potential of where this is going to end up. That Spencer Cox will be disqualified, Brian King will become the governor. Now, to prevent that would be to get behind the write-in candidate, for the GOP to say, we should have vetted the signatures, as we've been asking them to do since the first part of June. We should have vetted those signatures. We should have actually looked at the results of the primary election to see if it was valid, if there was any malfeasance or irregularities there, which we've been asking them to do since the moment the primary was done. In fact, before the primary, we were saying we want this verified. We want to verify the election. And to do that, we need the cast vote record. We need the voter rolls. We need to compare those things. And the lieutenant governor, who's supposed to be completely out of this race, sent letters to all of the clerks saying, don't give them any voter rolls. And even though she was providing nomination packets with signatures 2 weeks before we asked for the governors, and everything seemed fine when someone else was asking for a state school board nomination packet or a state senator, as soon as we asked for the governor's packet, stop the presses. No one can ever have access to a nomination petition. It's the most absurd argument that I've ever encountered from otherwise intelligent attorneys and legislators. But that was the argument. No, you can't have anything. You can't look at anything. Nobody can look at anything. Fortunately, the governor himself and the Attorney General candidate, Derek Brown, and Senate candidate, John Curtis, all said, we want our signatures verified. This was an attempt to silence the naysayers like Phil Lyman, who are saying we don't think they've got their signatures. Or in the case of Spencer Cox, just saying he doesn't have his signatures. Otherwise, we would not be facing so much opposition. So they wanted to call our bluff. So they had first the state auditor did an audit, and he came up and said, that Spencer Cox came up short. But if you take these other votes and you do this and you do that and you squint at this real hard, then he qualified. That's not what the legislative audit showed. It showed he was 572, that he lost 572 votes, and which put him well below the 28,000 mark, since he was starting at 28,006. Now you've got otherwise intelligent legislators and attorneys saying, oh, but there was more time. He could have gotten his signatures, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Or he qualified because he did everything he was supposed to. That's like saying the other team didn't cheat, therefore they should have the victory of the game, even though they didn't score as many points. Yeah, great. So somebody didn't cheat doesn't mean that they win the game. It means that they're not guilty of fraud. Somebody's guilty of fraud in this. When you've got thousands of signatures sitting at the AG's office, and I don't know how many. Just that this is a new revelation that came out of the legislative audit report, that there's a bunch of signatures at the Attorney General's office. Also, a revelation was that some of the signature packets were returned back to the Lieutenant Governor after they've been verified. So what you've got is a spoiled base of evidence. I don't know why we would do that. Again, I don't know why the Lieutenant Governor herself would be involved in this election at all. All of that should have gone to Greg Bell. So here's what I think should happen. Greg Bell, who has not weighed in on 1 ounce of this, should weigh in now. The one act that Greg Bell should do, and if he's truly been given authority over this, then he should step in and say, Spencer Cox, Deidre Henderson did not get their signatures. They're disqualified. By making that statement now, it gives the GOP time to at least pivot and say, hey, instead of attacking all the supporters of Phil Lyman, if we want somebody besides Brian King as the governor, we better get behind Phil Lyman's write-in campaign instead of disparaging Phil. In fact, the governor ought to get behind Phil Lyman's write-in campaign. Ought to say, hey, it was an honest mistake. I didn't get my signatures. I'll come back in 4 years and run again, or I'll hang up my hat, whatever he wants to do. But you can't say, I didn't get my signatures, but I'm the governor, so I'm going to continue to be the governor. To heck with the election and the signature requirements, all of those things. I'm the governor, so and the lieutenant governor's over my race and her race, so we win, you lose. That's not the way this is going to go down. So that's what I think Greg Bell should do. I think he should disqualify Spencer Cox and let the GOP know if they want to have a voice on this ballot. I'm very unlikely to get a new ballot printed. They're not going to get another election done. Judges are not going to go with that. So we're down to the write-in path for Phil Lyman and Natalie Clausen. We've got a lawsuit going against Richard and Carol Lyman. Last thing I want to do is sue people, but I don't know what else to do when we need justice and a recourse, and we need some action taken on the part of our judicial system to set this thing in order. We did a grammar request for these signatures. That was denied. We went to the State Records Committee for these signatures. That was denied under the false pretense of a criminal investigation in Washington County, et cetera, et cetera. False pretense or real pretense, it's gone back and forth. So then we go to court and we say, we made a motion to expedite this decision. The judge said there's nothing urgent about this decision. In other words, come back after the election. Come back next year for all I care, as long as you don't disrupt this election in progress. So we've appealed that, and now we're appealing in the district court to get those things. I also filed a motion with the Utah Supreme Court laying out all of these things, why the state legislature cannot interfere with the right of association of a political party. The Supreme Court has ruled on this issue before in favor of the political party. I'm fighting for the GOP. The GOP is fighting against my fighting for the GOP. So I'm fighting for the GOP in spite of them. Of course, the Supreme Court of Utah dismissed that without hearing it, said that it was frivolous and unfounded. I don't know what they say now, that there's a legislative audit report that says the opposite of that. But we're off to the Supreme Court of the United States with the same question that's been filed. Hopefully they will look at it, get back to us with an answer. Under any circumstances, I think we are dealing with a November ballot that does not have a Republican listed on the ballot. The closest you're going to get is a write-in of Phil Lyman. So take that for what it's worth. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your legislators, talk to your SEC members, talk to your county commissioners and tell them you cannot certify an election until some of these questions are answered. despite what the governor tells you, despite what the lieutenant governor tells you. Again, lieutenant governor should not even be weighing in on this election, on this race. So talk to those people in power. Talk to people about the State Records Committee, the malfeasance of the State Records Committee. They could have done something. All of this is on them. This is on the judiciary. This is on the GOP. I'm grateful to the leadership of the legislature, President Adams and Speaker Schultz, for allowing this audit to come out. I'm grateful to the legislative auditors, internal auditors whose job it is to deal with processes and improvements in processes, gave us some hints and some threads to pull on that clearly state in their audit that Spencer Cox likely did not get his signatures based on statistics. 95% certainty that he missed it by about 130, but it could be much higher than that, could be slightly lower than that, but statistically he did not get his signatures. Lots to talk about here, lots to unpack. So good luck with all of it. Thank you. So let me know what you think. Put a comment below. In the meantime, get your ballot, write in Phil Lyman, Natalie Clausen in the governor section, circle in the bubble, put it in the envelope, make sure that the write-in is not showing through the hole in your envelope, as most ballots have been designed to do there, and take it in and drop it off at your clerk's office, and have a great day.